legend of Blowing Rock. The town of Blowing Rock, North Carolina, is named for the Blowing Rock, an outcropping of rock studded with crystals that hangs over a deep valley in the Appalachian Mountains. The rock is famous for the constant, strong, upward draft that comes out of the valley below the rock. This wind is so steady that in the winter, snow will fall upwards around the rock. The legend that explains this unusual phenomenon is a romantic tale of love triumphing over duty and difference. Once, long ago, a young Chickasaw woman and her father moved deep into the mountains to escape the constant war between the Chickasaw and the Cherokee. One day, the young woman was out gathering food when she happened upon a handsome young man hunting in the woods. The two fell instantly in love, but they were also aware of the danger their love posed. The young man was a Cherokee. The two were lovers who should have been enemies. They met secretly in the woods. For months, they spent time together in secret places in the mountains and ignored what the rest of the world would think. Then, one evening, the two lovers saw a strange red glow in the sky. They felt drawn towards a certain cliff and stood on its edge as they watched the sky grow a deeper and deeper red until it was almost the color of fresh blood. The young man understood the sign. He knew that it was a warning that the Cherokee and Chickasaw nations were preparing for a huge battle, that blood would be lost on both sides. The young man knew his duty was with his Cherokee people. He knew his heart was with his Chickasaw love. Unwilling to decide which meant more to him, the young man chose another way. He leapt off the rock the two were standing on and into the valley below. The young woman, horrified at what had happened, prayed that the gods who controlled the wind would send her love back to her. They heard her prayer, and the young man was lifted back up into her arms. The young lovers journeyed together to each other's lands and used the example of their love to bring peace to the two nations. And the wind still blows strongly at Blowing Rock today. The Girl at the Overpass. On certain rainy nights where US 70A twists around a sweeping curve that passes by an old, overgrown underpass, drivers will see a young woman in a white evening dress standing by the side of the road, desperately trying to flag down a passing car. If anyone pulls over to help the young lady, she climbs meekly into the back seat of the car and explains that her name is Lydia, and that she's just been to a dance and now she's trying to get home. She gives the driver an address not too far away, and he kindly agrees to take her there. The driver may try to engage Lydia in conversation, but she seems distracted and in a world of her own, so he just leaves her in a respectful silence and concentrates on the road ahead. When the car pulls into the address that the young woman gave, the chivalrous driver invariably hops out to open the door for her, only to discover that she has vanished. Perplexed, the man goes to the door where an old woman answers. The man explains that he's picked up a young lady named Lydia by the overpass who asked to be brought to this address, but she's no longer in the car. He wonders if she may have run out before he could open the door, and he just wants to know if she's safe and if everything is as it should be. A faint, pained smile of recognition passes over the old woman's face as she reaches for a picture in a silver frame sitting on the table by the door. It's a photograph of the young woman the man drove to the house. Lydia was my daughter, the old woman says. She died in a car wreck by that overpass in 1923. You're not the first one, and I suppose you won't be the last. Every so often, her spirit flags down a passing car. I suppose she still doesn't understand what happened to her. I suppose she's still trying to get home. That's why the overgrown underpass near Jamestown is called Lydia's Bridge. Drive past it on a rainy night, and you may see Lydia too. For over a century, mysterious lights were seen bobbing up and down along the railroad tracks near Mako Station, a few miles west of Wilmington, North Carolina. When anyone approached the lights, they would disappear. The lights were observed many times over many years and even photographed on occasion. It's even said that President Grover Cleveland saw the lights while on the Whistle Stop tour in 1889. The source of these lights has never been determined, but according to legend, the light is the ghost of a railroad worker who died on the tracks one night in 1867. One tragic night in 1867, a train was rolling along the tracks and the signalman, Joe Baldwin, was sleeping in the caboose. Joe's slumber was broken by a violent jerk. A veteran railroad worker, Joe Baldwin, recognized the motion and immediately knew that the caboose had become detached from the rest of the train. Joe Baldwin's heart started racing. He knew that his one car was now stuck on the tracks, and that the main part of the train was rapidly moving away from him, and he had no way of contacting it. Joe also knew that his wasn't the only train scheduled for those tracks that night. A passenger train was due along soon, and if the oncoming train struck the stalled caboose, there would be a horrible accident. Joe Baldwin has a choice to make. He knew that he had to signal the oncoming train to stop. He knew that the only way to do this and be sure the engineer in the approaching train would see the signal was to stand on the platform at the back of the caboose. Joe Baldwin also knew that it takes a long time to stop a speeding train. Even if the engineer saw the light and stopped, there might be time to slow down enough to prevent a complete disaster, but the chances were good that the caboose was still about to be hit. Joe Baldwin knew that if that happened, he didn't stand much of a chance of walking away from that crash. Baldwin made the heroic choice. Grabbing his lantern, Joe stood on the back of the caboose as the sound of the oncoming passenger train rumbled closer. Joe frantically waved his light, trying desperately to catch the attention of the engineer. Joe's plan worked. The engineer of the oncoming train saw the light and pulled hard on the brakes, but the momentum of the tons of speeding steel kept the train moving, and the locomotive slammed into Joe's caboose. Joe's signal had worked. His bravery had prevented a more serious collision, but brave Joe Baldwin was decapitated in the crash. Joe's head was thrown by the force of the accident into the murky swamp surrounding the tracks. It was never found. His headless body was buried with hero's honors a week later. Ever since that night, lights have been seen moving up and down the track around Mako. Sometimes it's only one light, sometimes it's two. People say that it's the ghost of Joe Baldwin still searching for his missing head. Blackbeard's Ghost. On Ocracoke Island lies a spot known as Teach's Hole. This small inlet is reported to be the spot where the pirate Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, preferred to anchor his ship. It's also said to be where he met his end, and some say his ghost haunts the spot to this day. Blackbeard roamed the Atlantic from around 1716 until 1718, robbing ships from the West Indies to the Carolinas. He had a reputation for unbridled ferocity. When Blackbeard went into battle, he strapped multiple pistols and cutlasses to his body. Most frightening of all, he wove fuses into his long, black beard and set them on fire just before he stepped onto the captured ship. This towering figure, armed to the teeth with a sparking, flaming beard, must have been absolutely terrifying. Ship's captains would surrender without a shot being fired. Blackbeard's reign on the high seas came to an end on November 22, 1718. Virginia Governor Alexander Spotswood sent a ship commanded by John Maynard down to the North Carolina coast to track down and kill Blackbeard. Maynard surprised Blackbeard, and a skeleton crew anchored at Teach's Hole. In the ferocious battle that followed, Blackbeard was shot 5 times and stabbed no less than 20. The pirate crew was all killed or captured. Blackbeard's head was chopped off and hung from the bowsprit of Maynard's ship. His headless body was thrown overboard. Legend has it that the headless body swam around Maynard's ship, 3 times before sinking below the waters. Ever since then, it's been said that Blackbeard's ghost haunts the spot known as Teach's Hole. Many people have reported seeing a strange light moving beneath the water in the cove. It's said that this is Blackbeard's spirit swimming through the waters, searching for his missing head. What's more, on stormy nights, it's said that you can hear Blackbeard's voice calling out in the wind. Many people have heard a horrible roaring coming from the wind on dark and stormy nights in Teach's Cove. A roaring that sounds like someone bellowing, "Where's my head?" The Demon Dog of Valley Crucis. One of the most frightening apparitions in the catalog of North Carolina hauntings comes from the quiet mountain town of Valley Crucis, North Carolina. This small town takes its name, which is Latin for Valley of the Cross, from the 2 streams which meet at right angles in the middle of the valley. The morning mist lingers longer in the Valley of the Cross than elsewhere in the mountains, and even on sunny days, the town has a quietness to it that seems to set it apart from the rest of the world. But it's at night that the supernatural side of Valley Crucis reveals itself. There's a certain old stone church located along Highway 194, just on the edge of town, where among the leaning graves in the churchyard cemetery, something that could not possibly be from this world steps in and out of the shadows. It happened one time that 2 young men were driving along this road around midnight. It was a clear night and the moon was full, bathing the valley in an eerie white glow. As their car turned a corner passing the old church, the 2 young men saw a shadow leap out from behind one of the graves and into the road in front of them. Swerving to avoid whatever had landed in the road, the driver slammed his foot on the brake and pulled off onto the side of the narrow road. Wondering what he had almost hit, he craned his head around his shoulder to see what was in the road. It was a dog, but not an ordinary dog. This was a dog as tall and as wide as a full-grown man, covered with bristling black fur and bearing its yellow, massive teeth. And the animal's eyes were glowing, not reflecting light like a dog's eyes will do, but actually glowing, burning with a smoldering red light that seemed to have about it something of the very fires of below. The one young man turned to the other and asked, "Do you see that?" "No," his friend replied, "and neither do you." The animal began to walk towards their parked car. By mutual and unspoken agreement, the driver lifted his foot off the brake and slammed it down on the accelerator. They roared off down the mountain road, taking the hairpin turns and twists of the road, and 60, 70, 80 miles an hour. It was only when the driver looked in the rearview mirror that he realized the dog was still following them, and keeping up with them, and even gaining on them. Panicked and expecting the jaws of the dog to wrap around the bumper of the car and drag it down into the underworld, the driver gave one final push on the accelerator. Just as the beast was about to catch them, the car leapt over the bridge above where the streams meet and across, and the dog stopped following them. They watched it fade into the distance and wondered what supernatural law obliged this animal to obey and keep its territory limited by the boundaries of the water. The Devil's Tramping Ground. In the low, rolling hills of southern Chatham County, south of Siler City, in the woods near Harper's Crossroads, lies one of the most famous haunted places in North Carolina. The Devil's Tramping Ground is a mysterious, perfectly round, and absolutely barren circle about 40 feet in diameter in the pine woods of Chatham County. Not a tree, not a flower, no lowly weed, not even a single blade of grass will grow in the limits of the circle. Seed sowed there refuses to sprout. Any vegetation transplanted there will wither and die. And what's even stranger, any object left in the circle before dusk will have been violently moved outside its bounds by dawn. Dogs tuck their tails between their legs and whimper when brought near, and will dig their heels into the sand, refusing to be brought into the circle. Men have tried to spend the night in the circle, but not one has succeeded and remained sane. Something they see on their vigils drives them out of their wits, never to recover. For the devil's tramping ground has earned its name. It's said that here the devil himself walks at night. In his tramping ground, the devil spends his nights pacing around and around in a circle and turning his bitter mind towards ways to bring human souls to destruction. It's the scorching heat of his cloven hoofprints that kills the vegetation and has rendered the soil barren. He angrily brushes aside anything left in his path, his great strength easily able to toss aside the heaviest objects. When he walks in his private spot on earth, the devil drops the illusions with which he disguises himself when he appears to men. In his natural state, the face of this fallen angel is so horrible that no man can see it and remain sane. The mystery of the Devil's Tramping Ground has been known since Chatham County was founded shortly before the War for Independence. From generation to generation, the story has been passed down. Despite efforts by scientists to explain this barren patch of land, no satisfying explanation has ever been given. So if you're driving on the state road in rural Chatham County at night and you pass a curve in the road where there's a narrow path leading off into the woods, if you see a shadowy figure moving between the trees, it's best to drive away as fast as you can and never look back until you're long, long gone.